All right, everyone, welcome back. Hey, I just wanted to remind everyone, you guys are doing great about muting your line if you're just listening. So just really want to thank everybody for that. I am recording the presentations and they're individual recordings of each session. And we do ask that you turn off your video during the session to help with bandwidth. And we are monitoring the chat. We've logged some questions that we were not able to get to. We will be posting those in the Vision Resource Center. And you can see the option at the bottom of your screen for closed captions. So there's that. And for some reason, we don't want to advance the slide, so we were going to go do it another way. Okay, so wanted to let you guys know that our next session is, let me just grab this one here, from Jay Pope from Pope Tech. I'm really delighted that Jay's joining us because they've been not only a vendor, but a real partner along the way, helping us to identify how colleges can improve strategies to improve web accessibility. So in this session, you can see on the blurb here, he's going to explore with you practical things that anybody can do to significantly improve accessibility of a web page. For instance, we've helped marketing departments. It's not always just IT who's involved. So he'll identify strategies for scaling that out to hundreds or thousands of web pages. So he's a super great presenter. I know he's going to provide you guys fabulous information. He's going to review how Wave and Pope Tech can be leveraged together. And so I'm going to stop share and let him start share and take it away, Jay.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. So let me just share my screen and we will get started. It's always good to be here with you. As Angela said, if there are any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm going to make sure I have the chat pulled up and or unmute and ask as well. So today we're talking about simplifying web accessibility at scale. And a real quick, just a brief introduction. The Pope Tech platform for scanning websites is provided free to all California community colleges. It's provided by the Accessibility Center. And on July 1st, we'll be starting year 4 of working together. We also have the Instructor Accessibility Guide inside of Canvas. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about scanning websites. But between the two products, there's over 60 colleges, using Pope Tech, and we love working with you. So today's plan, at the beginning, we're going to talk a little about some of the challenges of web accessibility in higher ed, specifically related to your websites, and then some simple strategies for making a single web page accessible, and then how to scale those to your entire website or portfolio of websites. We'll have a few live demos, both how to use Wave and how to use Pope Tech, and it should be useful to anyone at any level, even if you're just getting started, if you're responsible for websites or if you're not. So, okay, so what are, and this is where I love any participation, what are some of the challenges of web accessibility in higher ed? And again, we're talking specifically about your websites. This is a safe place. Is there any comments anyone has, some of the challenges that you have? I'll give people a minute. Yeah, so somebody said posting non-accessible PDFs on a website. We do know from WebAIM user surveys from screen reader users that screen reader users are, that's one of the most impactful things they run into is inaccessible PDFs. That's a great point. Any other comments? Textbook publishers and other orgs sending us non-accessible PDFs for us to post. I'm going to even take that a little further. Just sometimes vendors, you purchase software like add-ons to your websites, a calendar plugin, whatever it is, and the inaccessibility of vendors. That's great. Challenges can be the use of color in posting linked documents. So people are creating content and they don't understand some of these principles. Complicated charts. And again, some third-party modules, especially math. Yeah, math can be definitely difficult. Those are great. Some of the ones that, I thought of, sometimes there's lack of awareness. So in the chat, there's contrast as well. And when you're talking about some of these specifics, is a lot of times the people creating this content don't have the training or the awareness. There's lots of content creators at colleges. It's not just one person or one team typically. Training, lots of content. We have lots of pages, lots of websites. We don't always have leadership buy-in as much as we'd want. Sometimes there's competing priorities, whether at the institution level, like they just want to buy this thing and they haven't considered accessibility, and they're not, sometimes that can be a challenge, or even just one person has multiple roles, no dedicated people. Somebody in the,
Yep, yeah. You see the chat, Jay. We've got lots of getting our web content editors to remember and understand accessibility, and videos. You can see.
Yeah, these are all, there's lots of challenges, and some aren't unique to higher ed, but some are. And a lot of that related to how many people that we have creating content at different places on different platforms throughout. As a great comment, I appreciate it. So kind of part of the idea of this presentation is this 80-20 rule, in that sometimes 80% of the impact can come from 20% of the effort. And so we are looking at ways we can simplify it, because there are challenges. Not all effort is the same, and it's okay not to be perfect. Like, we want to be perfect. We want everything to be accessible, but we don't want to be scared to get started or wait, to do the things that we can do until we have this perfect plan or this, perfect environment, because there are, different obstacles. So let's start with the things that have the most impact, control we can control, and then start small and gain momentum. And so the strategies we're talking about today are going to be kind of based off of, this idea, and then you can build on it and go further as well. So now that we've acknowledged some of the challenges, I do just want to take a minute and acknowledge some of the successes. So what we're looking at on this graph is, so this top red dashed line is the WebAIM Million. They just did another one recently, but they took the 1 million most popular homepages on the internet and scanned them with WAVE. And these are the number of detectable errors. So we had 59.6 in 2019. It increased to 60.9, and then the recent one, it just went down slightly. But as part of that, so this middle line, a little smaller dash brown line in the middle, of the domains that were .edu extensions, there were 37 errors per page, and that decreased in the past year to 34.9 per page. But again, this is the most popular .edu domains. And so at PubTech, we went and scanned a sample of up to 100 pages from every college and every college and university in the country, and to get a better fill. And we can see there was 24 errors per page, and it's decreased to 19. And if we go look at just public institutions, it's actually even less, and CCC colleges are even less. And so there's lots of wins. You guys are doing a lot of great things. And so we do have challenges, but a lot of effort's been put into accessible, and there's lots of good things, already happening. So, so let's start small. And so here's kind of 4 things when we're looking at a specific web page. This is a suggested, a potential pattern. It's something that I like to do. You could adapt it to what makes sense for you. But first, I like to wave the home page of a website or whatever page you're responsible for. And if you're not familiar with Wave, I'll introduce it in just a minute. And then the second is get into the documentation in Wave and just learn a little bit more about accessibility principles. And even someone who is just starting with accessibility, like we can start with these first steps and then test with the keyboard and then test with the free screen reader strategically. And so you can kind of build on each of these steps to have, impact. And again, right now we're talking about just one page, and then in a minute we'll talk about scaling this. So I'm gonna do a quick Wave demonstration and just a little bit of an introduction. Wave is managed by WebAIM. They're a nonprofit out of the Centers for Persons with Disabilities at Utah State University. And they've managed Wave for over 20 years. It's used to test millions of pages each year. It's one of the most used checkers out there, but it's also one of the most underused. I saw somebody on Twitter and they were sharing their 6 favorite accessibility tools. And I had a little chuckle because Wave does all 6 of the things that they were talking about. And Wave is free. And I'm actually going to, so as I go through, there's going to be some resources that I'm going to share. And this will be one. So I'm going to put this in the chat. You can download the Wave extension for free. Just by going to that URL, they have a Firefox or Chrome extension. There's also at that website, you can just run it on the website as well. But I'm going to show just a sec. Let's get out of there. And okay. So this is, I just went to Google and Googled higher ed templates for websites. And this is the first result. I didn't want to call out any college or anybody. But this is something, theoretically colleges are buying templates like this. And so we're at this example, template of a higher ed website. And I have already installed the Wave extension at the link I just put in the chat. And so at the top now in my browser, there's this Wave icon. It says W, and I'm going to activate it, and it's going to run an instant test on any website. So you can use this for testing the accessibility of any website. And one of the things I really like about Wave is it puts visual indicators on the page for these accessibility results. And then we have this panel on the side for the Wave results. And I know some of you might be more familiar with Wave, some might be more of a introduction. But we do find that a lot of people underuse it even when they're familiar with it. So I'm going to kind of quickly go through some ways that you can use it. Initially, we have this summary. So we have 11 errors, 89 contrast errors. These are the detectable errors that are going to be accessibility issues. They're going to tie to WCAG success criteria. So they're going to be WCAG failures. But then beyond that, we have alerts. There are things that need to be reviewed by a human. Manual testing is important. And then we have features, structural elements, and ARIA. Yeah, is there a comment from someone? Okay. So let's go into these. And one of the things that I like to do is actually use these checkboxes. So we go through and we can, click on this and it jumps over to the content in Wave. So we have a missing form label, and it shows us exactly where it is. And if we're not sure why it matters, we can click on it visually in here and get the reference and see exactly what this means, why it matters, how to fix it, the algorithm. And then this will link to a WCAG checklist if you wanted to go into the relevant standards. And you can also do that right from this panel as well. We can click on any of these results and see that as well. And so if I were working on this website, if I had access to fix these, I might fix them. If not, I might document these for somebody else to fix. And so I would kind of go through and either fix these errors or document them. And again, if you only have access to part of this, so let's say you're just a content editor and you can't change the template, then focus on the results that apply to you, and you can, check off the rest, ignore them. And you can still use this. So even if you're just working on fixing alternative text, you can use Wave, or you could be responsible for the entire page. So let's say we go through, we fix these errors, we document them, and we're kind of going through and saying, okay, yes, this is an empty link. A user with a screen reader is going to have no idea where this is going. You can view the code as well if you would like. So if you are familiar with code, you can view that and see exactly what's happening. Like, in fact, this search link would say nothing to assistive technology users. There's literally no content in there. It's going to be very confusing. So let's say we fix the errors, and then I would go to contrast errors. And for contrast, you have the contrast panel. So we can open this up, and we click on any of these errors, or we could come find one as well over here visually, and open it. And so it's going to show us that the foreground is this 888, it's this light gray on white. This is a 3.54:1 contrast ratio, and it does fail WCAG. It's an error. We can color pick the correct color or just slide it over until we pass and things turn green. And again, we would go now document this or fix it in our code. So we've reviewed the contrast errors. Now we move into alerts. So these are things that are suspicious, but may or may not be issues. So for example, these skipped heading levels, they're all throughout the content. And these are going to have a significant impact for users with disabilities. It may or may not necessarily be a WCAG failure, but they're things that you'd want to look at and just verify. When I am looking at the structure level, I'll go to the structure panel inside of Wave and open that up. And you have this overview of your entire structure. It includes your HTML5 regions and all your headings. And we get this document outline. One tip that I do is, even when we're anybody who's publishing like a blog post on our website, is we always run Wave. We make sure that we check all images, and then we check the outline here. This is just a great tool just to make sure you have a good solid outline for your document, even if there are not detectable errors or alerts. You can review this. So we're going beyond just those errors and alerts. So we check these off, and as I check them off, they're disappearing on the page as well. And so we go review each of these, fix the ones that we need to. And this is where most people just kind of stop a lot with Wave. But we want to keep going. So Wave will identify every single image on the page as either an error, an alert, or a feature. So we want to review the alternative text for each image, even if there aren't detectable errors. So for example, this one, maybe it's okay. Whereas the logo at the top, for example, for sure is going to be an issue, but we can just detect that manually and fix it. So we want to go review the alternative text for all of our images, things like form labels, things like language. Language can be very impactful. We were just talking about that with some of the PDF documents on a website. If this language is wrong and the screen reader is reading in a different language, it can be, you can take an accessible page and just with that one thing make it almost inaccessible. Like if a screen reader is trying to read this with a German accent or something, it's going to be very hard to understand.
Baptist Church.
I'm going to go ahead and check these off as well. So we go review those features. For the structure elements, I showed the structure tab before. I usually use the structure tab for that. So I'm going to check off these headings. There are some like lists that you would want to just review and make sure that the lists are the semantic lists or how you'd expect them to be. And these HTML5 regions as well. So we go through, we check those. And then ARIA. ARIA are things that are there for assistive technology only. They'll change nothing if you were just using this website visually and with a mouse. And so, but they can be very impactful. They could take something totally accessible and make it inaccessible, or they can help make things more accessible. And so Wave bring these to your attention. Like in this example, it's adding role equals presentation to these list items, which is going to make them, for most screen readers, behave as if they're not a list, which I would say is not good in this case. So I'd want to remove these because it could be helpful to know that we have 8 items in this list, for example. Like there's useful things by this being a list. And so we'd fix those. And so now we've gone through, we've used Wave for these. Some other things you can do is desaturate the page and just get a little bit of an idea on what it would look like with no color. There's also, you can turn off styles, and this is going to help you see the tab order. So this is what it is, without all the styles, how the content's laid out. And so you can use to test with that as well. And so I test with Wave that way. And then if I refresh, Wave's going to go away. I could also have actually clicked the Wave to turn it off. And then the next thing is keyboard testing. So I'm going to tab through here, and I just tabbed 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and I have no idea where I'm at. There's no focus indicators on this template. And so those are the kind of things that we're looking for. I'm going to jump back to our presentation here. Now, just like Wave is free, keyboard testing is generally free. We all pretty much have keyboards. It's a free tool. It's pretty familiar, but it's very impactful when there's issues with keyboard. And so that's something that you can do, especially when you're creating like templates or different things. Just make sure that you can tab through links, you can test forms and interactive elements. Do you always know where you're at visually? Can you access all the content? These are the type of things that you'll want to test with keyboards. I'm going to just put 2 articles here in the chat that could be helpful for keyboard testing and give you an idea of what kind of things you want to test. The first one's a WebAIM article that goes over techniques for testing with a keyboard. And then the second one is if you use a Mac, some of the default functionality for keyboard testing is turned off for whatever reason. I don't think it's a good choice by Apple, but that's how it is. And so you just want to turn that on before you do keyboard testing on a Mac. And then when you do screen reader testing, I would start with whatever's free for your operating system. Keep it simple. VoiceOver on Mac, NVDA on Windows. And then if you haven't done this before, make sure you follow like a guide to learn just what to expect. Because sometimes things might seem difficult, but you just might not know how to use the tool of the screen reader. And I'm not going to necessarily do a demo here on that today. And if it feels overwhelming, just start simple. Just start with Wave, start with errors. Just start somewhere doing something, and you can build on it over time. So I did just put 2 more articles in the chat. One is it's kind of a guide for using NVDA for Windows, and then one for VoiceOver for Mac. Okay, awesome. So if we go through that process, we've tested 1 page. We tested our home page. Now what about like thousands of pages? How do we scale this? And this is the next step before we even get into the full automated testing. A strategy I recommend is to pick a representative sample and then do the same process again. So if we took our home page, a representative subpage, something that maybe like your apply now page, or some representative subpage, and then a page with a form or a key interaction and a random page, and we went through the same process on just those 4 pages, we're going to fix 80% of the issues on websites that's using the same template. And so because doing that same process, it can be pretty quick for one page, but when you're talking about hundreds of thousands, it's impossible to do that. We don't have enough time, we don't have enough resources. So that's kind of a, a strategy to make that happen. Just a sec. And then, okay, here real quick. You'll also want to do this like initially, and then maybe once a year. And then anytime like a new template happens, we want to catch those errors as quick as we can. Ideally, even in development, go through this process. So manual testing is required. No automated checker catches everything. When I was talking about errors, I was saying detectable errors. But automated testing is your friend. It can make your life easier. Even some of that manual testing, we leverage a tool like Wave to help make that simpler. So that by going through that Wave process first and then keyboard, by the time we've gotten to screen reader testing, it's going to be simpler. There'll be less clutter. It'll be easier to do. Now we're shifting a little bit into using a tool such as PopeTech. Before I do that, are there any questions about Wave and kind of what I talked about, that process for testing a single page? Okay, and if there are, feel free to jump in anytime. So we want to create a baseline for our college. This is an initial crawl. So your college might have a few dozen websites. It might have one website, might have 100 pages, might have 1,000, might have 20,000. But we want to get kind of that inventory of what we have. And we can use PopeTech to crawl all this content automatically and then scan that content automatically and just set it and let it do the work and then view the reports after. But that initial baseline will let you know where you're at today and what is your web accessibility scope. And I would do this before you go through what I just said, because then as you fix those errors, you'll see your progress over time and kind of track what's happening there. Another benefit of automated testing that way is you can identify other potentially problematic components. So things like we want to know where forms or interactions are happening and test those a little bit more. Videos, that was one of the comments that was given. Videos can be problematic, and even just knowing how many videos you actually have and where they're at can be very helpful. And then you can, from there, determine if there's actually captions on them. Same thing with the PDFs. So we can identify where all your PDFs are and where all the Word docs are and the HTML files are linked from your website. And that can really help, focus your efforts. There could be common components in things like slideshows, galleries, maps. You might identify some third-party things that are like interactive tours we've seen that, think of those complex things that are going to be problematic, for accessibility. So let's go to, so let's do a demo. There is a question in the chat if we can use PopeTech to scan all of our Canvas courses. So it's a little bit, so the instructor accessibility guide is used in line inside of Canvas to help for training and remediating content, but it doesn't automatically scan all the content. That is a project that we're working on to do that directly. You could use the PopeTech platform, potentially scan Canvas, but you're going to get other content as well. It wasn't designed for that. What I mean by that is you can use the PopeTech platform to scan behind any website login. So you can script it and scan behind a login. And so you could potentially do something like that. But again, it's not necessarily designed for that. We do have a future project that we're working to integrate directly with Canvas and just give you everything I'm talking about for your website, but for Canvas. So. That's a great question. Thanks, Susan. Okay, so I am going to show how PopeTech works for a bit. This is the PopeTech dashboard. And so this is the PopeTech platform. And again, this is something provided to your colleges for free. There's no cost. I've just went ahead and added that same example website that I just showed you. I had it crawl and add up to 29 pages and just give us a little kind of sample of how it would work. But first, when you first go to log into PopeTech, we'd go over here to websites and we'd create a website. I'm just going to edit the existing one and we would put in the URL. So this would be like your college domain. And we could change how many pages deep it's going to go. And then we save it and come down and tell it to crawl. And so that's it. And now it's going to go crawl and find however many pages you said, go through and find those pages. You're getting an inventory of your website. What do I have? In my case, it just took about a minute. If you have thousands of pages, you might, set this and then come back later, come back the next day, kind of whatever makes sense on how many pages you're talking about. And so it's going to crawl and add those pages for you. And then we'll want to scan. And we could start a scan right here up at the top, but I'm going to go over to accessibility scan. And this is kind of our recommendation. You do that initial baseline, and then we come in here and scan all of our websites. And I'm going to tell it to do it recurring. So we could do monthly, quarterly, weekly. So I'm going to leave this at monthly. Pick the start date you want it to, the time, and then do generate a report. And there's different report options, and you can send this to different users. But what'll happen, when I tell this to scan, is I'll get a scan right now. So you get your initial baseline, and then every month it's just going to automatically scan for you and send you a report into your inbox, and you don't have to do anything. But now you have this accessibility cadence ongoing. So there's a question if you have to scan subdomains separately. So when you're setting this up inside the website settings, on the crawler options, you can tell it to include subdomains. And so when it crawls, it's going to go add subdomains. It does add them as a separate website. But then when you scan, I scanned an entire group with all the websites in there. So you can scan the group of websites and have it do the same thing. And there could be 10 subdomains in there. So yeah, great question, Nathan. And so there's just a little bit of setup, but it takes just a couple minutes of active. We could do this in 2 minutes of active time. We start our crawl, we come back, we scan, and we schedule it to happen every month. And in a couple minutes of active time, now we have this cadence of accessibility every month in these reports, as well as our baseline, and track our progress over time. And then once we've done that, now we have these results. So let's go back to the dashboard. And these are going to be familiar with Wave, what we just looked at. PopeTech's powered by Wave. And so we can drill into any of these. We have the same results. Here we're looking across 29 pages, but it could be across 20,000 pages. It could be across 20 websites, one website, however you set this up. And so let's drill into a result of these errors. Let's say, okay, these empty links. And if you're not sure inside the platform, there's documentation as well on what this means, why it matters, how to fix it. We're going to drill into one of these. If you had multiple websites, you could look between them. And this is new. So if you've seen PopeTech before, this last month, we added this inspect option. And you can also drill into Wave, but inspect actually pulls Wave directly inside of the PopeTech platform. So it's all the functionality of Wave now right inside of here. And you don't have to re-drill into these empty links that we just drilled into. And we also, you can view the code here as well if you're a developer, and kind of the same things that I showed before. And so we'll start high level, drill into this. Some other strategies that can be useful if we're trying to determine which pages to use in our 4-page sample to now go test more in depth. we could look at ones that have maybe these most common issues and drill into these. What are the ones that have a page that has some of the most errors, and then let's fix that. And we're really going to fix a lot more because those same components and templates are used throughout, your website. Another potential strategy is going into like features, and we can identify where all of our form labels are. So we're drilling in and finding out where are all of our form labels. This page has 17 labels, and so this could be a good candidate for one that I want to test more. Another example is, if you found an issue in, a little bit, we were talking about tables and PDFs in the last presentation. Well, tables on your website, if we found an issue with, a table row scope or something like that, we could now go and drill and say, where are all of my tables? And PopeTech's going to identify where all of your tables are. It's also, if we look in alerts, if there's any links to PDFs, any embedded YouTube videos, now it's just automatically giving us this inventory of where these things are at. And so we can find them easily. Okay, so I'm just gonna switch groups real quick inside of PopeTech. And this is some of our internal websites, but it has more data than just that one scan. You can also compare by groups inside of PopeTech and track your progress over time. And this is where, if you did that process, if we got that initial baseline and you went and fixed those errors, you're going to see a significant decrease with relatively little effort, and it's going to remove lots of real accessibility barriers for people. Okay, any questions about kind of a little bit how that works with PopeTech? If there's not, we will hop back over here. So this is what I was talking about with the accessibility cadence. We want to schedule our scans to happen on all content at least quarterly is our recommendation. Automated testing is cheap, it's quick. You don't have to do anything after you set it. It just happens. And so it helps you catch some of those things that will be missed by that 4-page sample. And it helps you catch regressions. You can use it to have more accessibility conversations inside your teams and use it to involve leadership as you're making improvements. The graph on the screen is one of our clients. This is a university, and they were able to, in short order, fix over 350,000 errors. And we saw them having this progress, and we reached out and asked, like, what are you doing? I go, well, how are you being so successful? And the things were pretty generic, some of the things that we covered today. But our summary was they were just being consistent about it. They're doing consistent things to improve their accessibility. This is what that report would look like if we had set it. So you'd get this in your inbox every month, and it's just automated, no effort on your part. And we have the errors per page, the number of pages, total errors. There's this delta, so how many errors have increased. So you'll catch any regressions, percentage of pages, no detectable errors. And then there's full like PDF or CSV reports you can configure as well to come with this email, however you set it up. Okay, so let's take a minute and kind of summarize these practical strategies that we covered. So we took simple manual tests on a single page. And again, if you don't feel comfortable doing the screen reader testing, do the rest. And then we do the same test on a representative sample for each website. Took a baseline scan of all websites and identify other potential issues like videos, PDFs, etc. And then an accessibility cadence each month. And by doing this, you're going to have a lot of impact, and it's something that I think is pretty achievable. I'd say for most colleges, probably. I mean, we can make some level of this happen. One other thing I would like to point out is not everyone at your college needs to be an accessibility expert. One of those challenges we talked about at the beginning was training. But many people just knowing a few key principles that relate to their job is going to have a significant impact. Some people might just need to know images, headings, and links. Let's teach that. And that's going to have a significant impact. People are just editing just content inside of CMS. And training is key to scaling accessibility in higher ed, but it doesn't have to be complicated. We can start simple with some basic ideas. So here are some real world specific strategies that were used by higher ed clients using Pope Tech. So for example, if it's achievable, it is helpful to have somebody have a specific role to be responsible for web accessibility. You can add your developers or your content creators to Pope Tech and give them access to, just a specific website or a section or just view only access. You can add as many users as you like. Focus on alternative text. So one college focused on alternative text, like in a monthly training, and they'd send out an email with some tips. They'd track the improvement in Pope Tech. And then the next month or the next quarter, they'd pick another topic, kind of however made sense for that college on how fast they wanted to go. We have one university that does a PDF purge every year. So, I mean, there was like 3 comments about these dang inaccessible PDFs. And so what they do is they have this list of all the PDFs inside of Pope Tech, and they send that to the individual groups responsible for the different websites. And the first goal is, if the PDF isn't needed, remove it. And then the second is, if it can be converted to HTML and that makes sense, then do that. And then third, now make it accessible. And so by following that, they're able to decrease their scope and make things a lot easier. Another idea is to identify training topics from the most common errors. And when I'm saying this, these can be really simple. So you could just take some of that documentation inside a Wave even and put that in an email. You could, just go through, let's just learn this one thing this month and, and fix this and then improve it. And then over time, build on that. We don't have to make it complicated. If you're able to go beyond what I'm saying, that's awesome. But yeah, keep it as simple as you can do. Another one is some do a yearly competition, so they eliminate as many errors as possible. We have a university that has a goal for each department to be Wave clean, so they're trying to get as close to as little, Wave errors. And we know that's not always, again, possible because some of the challenges we said at the beginning, but make a goal that makes sense for your specific circumstances. So there's a question on who you should contact to sit down and work with for setting up quarterly scans. And if you can target and provide report for separate department web pages. So that is possible. That can be, so the Accessibility Center can help with that. At the end, I'll also put my contact information. I'd also be happy to help anyone who needs help. And so if there's anything, any questions like that, yeah, we'd love to work with you. So. There is a question on my thoughts on accessibility toolbars like AudioEye and Accessibility. So one of the challenges of fixing, so what an overlay or an accessibility toolbar is trying to do is fix things with JavaScript on top automatically. But as we just talked about, you can't detect everything automatically. And a lot of it requires manual, so you can't fix everything automatically. And a lot of them cause more issues than they solve. There's no silver bullet, there's no just easy win. Accessibility is about people, and so it requires us to think about people and get into that source and fix it. So I don't really like things that try to fix it. There can be maybe some use cases for just the toolbars potentially. But the things that try to just fix it and then promise things they can't deliver, I'm not a fan. So yeah, great question. If you set up the scaffolding, it gets easier over time. So kind of what we're talking about, once you set this up, people are going to be more trained over time. Errors are prevented instead of remediated. So right now, when you do that initial baseline, you might be like, oh man, I have so many errors. But you can, after you fix those and you're doing this process over time, you're now preventing errors instead of remediating them. Every person you train who does it right now is now not going to cause those same issues in the future. Accessibility is planned on new updates, less clutter, let's automatically catch regressions. And then that final, kind of what I've talked about today, it's not going to catch every single issue, but that final 20% now is a lot more approachable. And you've kind of leveled up to be able to tackle more of that. I just want to take a minute, like updates to Pope Tech. We did recently add in that new inspect functionality I showed, where waves directly inside of Pope Tech this past month. And then we are adding broken link checking. So I'll identify all broken links for you. That can be something maybe to get more people excited about accessibility who wouldn't be otherwise potentially. And then how to sign up. So Pope Tech is free, like I said at the beginning, for all California community colleges and districts. We're going on year 4. There's no cost to you. You just need to go to ccc.accessibility.org/web-1/scanning-monitoring-tools. And I'm going to put that in the chat. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize all that. So that's in the chat. And then I'm also just going to put an article where I go on our website that talks about some other strategies potentially and things to consider, specifically like third party vendors as you're purchasing software. That might be useful. Any questions? I think we have 3 minutes. I went a little long, but is there any questions anybody has? My email is on this screen. It's j@pope.tech, jay@pope.tech. So if you have any questions and I can help, I'd love to be a resource. Any questions from anyone else of things about this?
This is an awesome opportunity, team, to ask Jay. He is, you know, one thing I appreciate about you, Jay, is that there is no stupid question. I always feel, you know, no matter what, I can ask you anything. So group, this is a wonderful opportunity. If you want to come off mute and just ask him anything, he's the one. And yes, it is great to see the updates and everyone's really super grateful. Jay, you always do such a great job.
Awesome. I always appreciate being here. And if there is, if you are feeling a little overwhelmed and you're trying to start kind of an accessibility strategy at college, like for reals, reach out, email me. And that's not like a cost. We actually we don't sell any services at Pope Tech. It's just our platform. So yeah, reach out. I'd love to be a resource. So there is a question on a rough timeline for the Canvas admin kind of project that we're creating. That's like an LTI integration for Canvas. It's a great question. Hoping later this year. Most likely it won't be before fall semester, unfortunately, but later this year, and we'll definitely keep you updated on that. So yeah, and that PDF purge idea, when I heard it, I was like, oh, I like that. And you can do similar things with some other things as well. So if there's things that are problematic, can we just reduce our scope instead of and simplify our life? So, and sometimes it's even just removing pages. So Pope Tech will give you that list of pages. Are there pages that don't apply anymore? Let's just get rid of them if they provide no value anymore and they're just, you know, inaccessible. There's a question. So can I use this just on the websites I am responsible for? Yep, absolutely. So you just go to that URL in the chat, sign up, and add in just the websites you're responsible for, and you're good to go. It could even be a section of a website. So some colleges are, they have faculty that have access to just like 1 or 2 pages, and they are creating those as their own website and giving faculty just access to those. And they're logging in and they can use PopeTech on that, and then get a report over time. Yeah,
Perfect. And with that, I need to stop the recording and